I'm recording now because I will never seem to remember. So for the purpose of the recording, I'm just going to move back the slides so you can see them. I'm just muting everyone so that there's more quiet. All right, start to wrap up your sentence, wind it down. And What I'd like to know, so for the interest of time, I'm not going to have us read this exercise, though we will read future ones. I want to just know from you, did anyone feel like they either struggled to figure out their inciting incident? Did it turn out to be a different place than when you last checked? So just give me like kind of an overview of what you discovered by writing. And I'll just go down and just call you by name, and you can either tell me or pass. Yannicka.
So mine seems to be a somewhat similar inciting incident, but it may be moving around. So in present day times, when the character Albie, whose dad was the survivor of the World War II Japanese concentration camps in the Dutch East Indies. Anyway, this character Albie, the inciting incident now is when he has that telling scene where he's ordered ultralights that are going to fly and be risky, much against everybody's will, that his daughter does start yelling at the mom, and he does do two things that for this family are, inciting incident. You can't go back. Mm-hmm. He doesn't reprimand the daughter, mm-hmm. kind of encourages her. They're a team against his wife, who he's trying to be on good terms with. And also, they've unpacked these huge crates. There's no way he's going to send them back. And, right. He shared that fact. That's
great. So his thoughtless purchase has caused a fracture in the family.
Right. And he's going to embrace it. He's not going to do, yeah.
All right. Good. All right. Jordan, what would you like to tell us about your inciting incident?
Well, I'm happy with where mine happens because I think it happens on the second page. So I was glad when I double checked that. But I was also thinking about what you said about sometimes characters getting what they want and not getting what they want. And I realized that for my inciting incident, it is the character getting what she's always wanted. And it kind of sets her on this journey, but she never actually gets what she wants.
Yes.
So it's like the starting point, but you get to the end and kind of realize, wow, she never actually met her goal, but all of this other stuff happened. So I think that's interesting.
Right. And often that's what a character gets, what they think they want. And then they find the journey takes them to a different place. Right. Yeah, that's great. Carrie, anything come up for you? I know you're working on short stories. It might be a little different.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure as you were reading all that stuff, how mine would work. So my character's in has come to a landmark, like an important, well-known building in New York, and she's going to attempt something. And once she steps through the doors, she's been seen, and like they run her through a metal detector and stuff, and like there's no going back after that point. She can't return and go home again. Sort of.
That's great. And in short stories, your inciting incident often happens much sooner in the story. And in
maybe it's not enough, though I'm not sure.
And that's something, it's the question we can always be asking ourselves is, for all the stuff that comes before the inciting incident, why is it there? Why is it compelling? What does the reader need to know about it? And if you find that maybe you're launching into backstory, or you're explaining too much, or you're setting too much of the scene, you might want to trim some of that. So good. Nancy.
Well, I'm not really sure where my inciting incident is because I'm not really sure which one to call it, which incident to call it. I mean, because it's this gradual process that this young woman went through and every step was a point of no return in a way, but she had no intentions of going back. But she was just going in the right direction for her. But so that's sort of the process that the story takes. And I'm not sure which one incident is going to be called an incident.
Well, I would say the first one, like the very first step she takes that is a point of no return for her should be
leaving.
Qualified. Yeah.
Just leaving. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That happens. Okay, well,
absolutely that works. Leaving your life as you know it in any shape is an inciting incident.
Yeah. Okay, well then that's it. The first page.
You did it. Good. All right, Mark. Any luck this time?
Well, yeah, since we we get to share some things we've already written, that's easy.
Yeah.
Uh, this is from a short story I wrote, and the exciting incident. It's called Sky Blue or Blue Sky, excuse me. The inciting incident is the character goes into an unknown, dangerous place. And let me just read just the first two, 3 sentences. Don't breathe, don't twitch, keep your slicer ready. It's your only defense, thought Casey in mental overdrive. She'd made a poor decision going down there, down an unfamiliar, gloomy maintenance tunnel. She could hear tendrils slithering, scraping on bare metal, searching, sniffing down the carbon dioxide trail she made. And it goes on.
Yeah, right. Jumping right into something. That's great.
Well, I think short stories kind of have to,
I think so too.
With few exceptions, all my short stories start with an inciting incident, putting somebody
into a situation.
The way I like to describe it, you take your character, you sit them down while their legs are still bicycling, and you set them down on the ground, they take off running.
Good.
It's wound up spring.
Good. Thanks for sharing. Susan.
The inciting incident in my current novel is her finding the dead body.
Yeah. And you're writing a mystery, so that's often the kind of inciting incident.
It's at I think it's at the end of the first chapter.
The end of the first chapter. Perfect. And Rachel.
I thought my inciting incident I was pretty tight on. The only thing is I don't know which. I have 2 things that happen pretty one after the other, so I don't really know if it's 2 inciting incidents or if it's just one. So
are they
I can
related?
tell you about it.
Yeah,
yeah, they're definitely related. So one is this is the start of book 2. So some things have happened. The main characters have unbonded, basically have unmarried from each other.
Yeah.
And so the main character, Bashi, has decided that he's just going to go back to his life and forget about her. However, new restrictions, new religious restrictions have made it so unbonded people are highly taxed. So his mother convinces him to marry a woman in the village. And so he says, fine, whatever, I don't care. And the woman who he's going to marry happens to be the intended for his best friend who was in the army. The best friend comes back to give his blessing, saying, this is great because you can bond with her and she'll be safe and she'll be happy and she won't be thrown into debtor prison for not being able to pay the tax. So he says, well, don't you that would mean that you're going to lose your love. He's like, love is not bonding. And so that's when Bashi decides that he is going to trade places with his best friend so he can bond with his friend. And then he goes off and takes his place in the army.
I would call that your inciting incident.
That's what I thought too.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That's interesting.
Okay.
I like it.
So it's a lot of like one thing is he decides. Yeah. And so my only question was, is inciting incident always an external force?
No. I mean, sometimes it's an internal change, like someone's perspective or opinion. It's not always an event, but it will lead to events. So it just has to have that gravity, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Jordan. Did I already ask you, Jordan? I'm going like crazy. Okay. It's just, the name. That's right. Martha. Oh, I think you're still muted. No, there you are.
Okay. So I discovered that my inciting incident.
I think she's frozen. Anybody else? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just you, Mark.
Okay.
Nobody else is
my inciting incident happens actually before page 1, a few months before. So we're dropped into her having this condition. She's growing this tail and she's in bewilderment and she's just getting over the terror and she's still touching it and getting more comfortable with it. But then in chapter 4, she gets the clarity and she meets a long lost relative who gives her clarity and confirmation. Okay, this is what's happening, and kind of sets her on a, points her in the right direction.
So chapter 1 then is about her sort of grappling with or becoming comfortable with this thing that's happened to her?
Becoming comfortable, and the love of her life just came back into town after 7 months away.
That could be an inciting
incident. How is he
incident.
going to respond to this?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't.
Well, I would say that the potentially the lover coming back is actually more of an inciting incident, even though there's an event that happened before the story takes place. Your current story, they're still going to want that, like, where does this story start? And you might even ask, why don't you start the story when she first discovers her tale?
Because I need it to grow. I need to get some growth in.
You could always have like a very short opening scene and then jump to a couple months later. It's just a thought. I mean, I could be totally, don't listen to me if it doesn't resonate. It's just, that would be a pretty cool opening scene.
It would.
But you're right. If it's little nub.
Boyfriend comes back on page 1. So there's immediate anxiety.
That works.
How do I get myself together?
Yeah. Okay. I like it. Good. All right. Oh, Sochi.
So I really struggle with this because I feel like I just write into oblivion with no real purpose. So I don't know, I feel like I have a lot of these with no reason, but this exercise helped me kind of narrow down. So I'm writing a love triangle. And so this made me kind of, and I knew I'd have to do this. If there's a love triangle, I so far what I've written, it's just kind of one-sided, and it's the reader's gonna choose one, but I really want the reader to be struggling with which one does she pick. Right. So now there's an incident where I wrote about my protagonist having an experience with the other lover that kind of questions which one does she pick, which side is she on. So for me, that was kind of the inciting incident that I felt I could work with.
Okay.
Who does she pick?
Yeah, and choices of any kind can act as an inciting incident. When a character makes one choice and it's often the wrong choice or not the complete choice, there's a lot of potential in there. So good work, everyone. All right, so let's move on to talk a little bit more about this bigger idea of a story-worthy problem. So, of course, the inciting incident is the beginning of a problem or a situation that hopefully is going to take most of the novel or the story to resolve. So this is partly why it matters where you start your story, because once that inciting incident happens, and hopefully it's not too far in, the reader is then going to be like, okay, now I'm ready for this ride you've set me on. This is also, I'm trying to think why I bolded this one question here. This is tied to what your character wants. Yes, it is. A story is only interesting if your character has a compelling goal, right? So if they're after something, and again, I know like in a situation like Martha, you're describing a character where something happens to her. So that might change the shape of the goal. Like she's not looking to do something. She might be looking to hide something or looking to understand something, or, like her goal may be less outwardly focused and more inwardly focused. So I just want to make sure that we understand that goal is a word we use loosely. But story-worthy problem means that after this inciting incident, there's enough at stake, there's enough consequences, there's enough of a sense that now this problem can carry an entire story. So it's like, if your inciting incident is just something interesting or compelling or challenging that happens to your character, but then there's not much that comes after it and you can't figure out, well, now what? You might not have a strong enough inciting incident. You might not have a strong enough story-worthy problem. Like I think all stories are kind of about a problem or a question or some kind of quote unquote mystery. I don't mean genre mystery, that characters are trying to either answer, solve, discover, find, something like that, right? If you do, again, find that you're falling too heavily into backstory, explanation, or other setup, really kind of ask yourself again, where does my story really start? And do I have a problem with enough gravity and consequences, which I'll talk about in the next slide, to sustain the story? And a lot of us discover at about the midpoint of our book or our story that we don't have enough to sustain it, and we get stuck there because we go, well, I don't know where to go from here. And this is also, I would say, a reason to advocate for plot planning when possible. If I understand if you're like me and you just like to sort of write your way in, but sometimes it is worth doing the plot planning so you know in advance what's going to happen, and then you can just write to it. The problem that is compelling the story might be a new one. So it might be something new that's happening to your character. Again, Martha, I'm just using you because it's convenient. It might be something, whoa, I am growing a tail. This is like now changing my life. It could be an old problem resurfacing. Someone comes to town. A letter turns up that reveals information about somebody's, parentage. I don't know, like, it doesn't matter, but you want to also ask yourself these questions, like, is it a new problem? Is it an old problem? And what does your character want in the beginning of your story? So let's answer that question now. What does your character want? And that wanting can be, again, it can be internal and interior, it can be goal-oriented, but what is driving this story for them? What, maybe you might not even know yet. So if you're not entirely sure, kind of try to guess. Try to sort of just kind of go with a gut reaction here. Give yourself another minute and try to answer without thinking about it too hard, if that's possible.
There you go. Tell him what's up.
All right, 30 seconds. finish up your sentence. All right, so here's the challenge I give you when I go around and call your name. I want you to tell us in as little as a sentence if you can. I know you might have written 5, 10, or less. Try to sum it up what your character wants, particularly in the opening of your story. That may change down the road or whatever it is you wrote about in this particular section. Okay, Susan.
She wants something to do. She wants a case. She's a PI. And underneath it, she wants to find a way to come to terms with her son's death.
See, there's the heart of it. That's great. Yes. Rachel.
Bashi wants to find Talia and rebond with her, and Talia wants to keep Bashi safe and hidden and find out who in her family betrayed her and why.
Nice, very succinct. Martha. Oh, you're still muted for some reason. Oh, I think you were telling me that.
She wants to get a boyfriend.
She wants to get a boyfriend? All right. So wait, now didn't you say her ex? Is it her ex-boyfriend?
Her best friend, friends to lovers.
Okay, so it's a best friend who's coming.
Yeah,
Got it.
get the status, the move to the next level.
Perfect. Perfect. Again, it's very succinct. Sochi.
Her basic fight in this is getting the Germans out of her country. She's very protective of her country and the people of it, and survival of those who can't take care of themselves.
Yes. So she's really got a cause, and she's in it for the justice.
Yes.
Great. Yannicka.
So let's see. I wrote that elderly Jakob, the one who survives the tough years of World War II, wants to leave a legacy for his children. He wants to fulfill his lifelong quest of everyone being safe and accounted for. And that mythical safe state is the opposite of what he experienced when he was young during the war years.
Yes.
And he also wants to wrap up unfinished business and old guilds, especially with his son, Albie.
Nice. Jordan.
My main character is a painter, and she wants to paint the waterfall where her grandparents met and fell in love because that was her mother's dying wish.
Oh, that's beautiful. Fulfill a dying wish is always good. Good gravity there. Carrie.
She wants to right a wrong that an arrogant man made wrong.
Nice. And Nancy.
She wants to be on her own, to do what she wants when she wants without having to ask anyone.
And that's coming from opposite circumstances, right?
What's coming?
She's existing in circumstances where she doesn't get to do all those things, right? That's why she wants it.
She was existing, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Did I get everyone? So I know Mark told me that he has power outages that last 5 to 10 minutes, so he dropped off, but I hope he'll be back in time for his critique. If not, we'll do it anyways and we'll record it and send it to him either way. All right, did I catch everyone? Did I miss anyone? Okay. So one of the ways you can assess whether your inciting incident and that story-worthy problem is working is that it sets up consequences for future scenes. And it should have an immediate consequence. So whatever happens in the first scene, there should be an immediate consequence for the next scene. It may not be what your character thought would be the consequence, but it will be, and this can take the form of, like I said, a reaction and an obligation. It could be a choice. It doesn't matter, but it gives your character something to do. So, thing happens. Now character has to do something about it, choose something, have a discussion, take an action. It doesn't matter what. But if the event happens and then it's like, all right, we're going to go have dinner now. If it's just kind of banal, then you want to think about whether there's enough gravity there. And I wanted to put this quote from the writer Kate Milliken, who's got a wonderful novel out called Kept Animals. And she, from a teaching standpoint, she says your character is the subject. I don't know why it says subjection. Your character is the subject. The action is the verb. The object is the end goal. A novel is a complete sentence. I just love that. But that makes perfect sense, right? Your character is who the story is about. The action, what happens to them, is the verb of that sentence. And then what they want, the object, is the end goal of the story. I just love that little, isn't that nice? Yeah, very succinct. You can see why she's a great writer. So thinking in terms of consequences, we won't write about it right now, but I want you to think, does my inciting incident and my opening scene and my opening chapter set up a consequence for my characters for the next scene? And what is that consequence? You know, you may have already written it, but this is also something you want to continually be thinking about every scene. So my scene is concluded. I hopefully haven't left my scene in too tidy a place where the reader is going to say, oh, I'm happy I can just put this book down and never come back to it. You always want to leave them a little hungry, a little wanting for more. And then, but you also want to make sure there's something that everything sets up the next scene. And sometimes it will be because you left the action hanging. You might actually end on a cliffhanger. Sometimes somebody makes a discovery that then creates more paths of possibility. You know, there's so many variations on how you end a scene, but most important is that it never feels like a complete end. It feels like only an end to something in this moment. And I often talk about, you know, definitely don't let your reader feel satisfied at the end of a scene or chapter, because you want them to keep reading. You want your reader to say, I stayed up till midnight or 2 a.m. because I couldn't stop reading this book. And every time I thought I was going to put it down, it just got interesting again, right? So that's something you want to build into from the beginning. Now, there's other things that you want to do within your first scene. And like I said, for some of you, your inciting incident may not take place here. It might be a little bit later, but you still want to make sure that the ingredients and the elements in this first scene satisfy some important goals. And so what I like to think of that, anything that comes before the inciting incident, as the pressure cooker. And this is where you're setting up all of the things that are going to go into that pressure cooker with your character. And they are the forces that are going to work against your character as well as for them. But what we're most interested in from a story standpoint is, what are the forces working against your character? Because these are going to create conflict and friction and internal doubt and all of those things that make readers interested. So I want you to think about, what are the existing forces that are already in your character's life in the opening scene? So I just threw out some suggestions: the demanding father, the toxic job, your character's tendency towards self-doubt. So what you want to include here is what the reader needs to know to understand the character, but not so much that it becomes dense and heavy backstory, right? And then you also want to think about what new forces are being introduced. And this is mostly going to come at the point of the inciting incident. So this is where you bring in the antagonist, new choices, new decisions, perspectives, right? And you want to make sure this, again, is being demonstrated in action and dialogue and not explained or summarized too neatly. So we will not read this aloud just for the sake of time, but I would like you to write down, can you think of one or two forces that are working against your protagonist in their existing life prior to the inciting incident? And then can you give me one force that is introduced at or after the inciting incident? It might be the incident itself. So again, what's what the hero's journey calls it, what is the ordinary world of your character? That doesn't mean it is ordinary, it just means it's normal to them. And then what is being introduced? What kind of forces are being introduced? So see if you can get one of each. And we'll just take a couple minutes and then.
Anybody there?
We're writing right now, Mark.
Options.
Glad to see you back. All right, so start to wrap it up yourself. All right, so just again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to have us read these, but if you'd like, actually, if you want to go ahead and put in the chat, you're welcome to type them in, and then we can read them to ourselves, and just put like, you know, existing force, new force. That would be fun. So we'll move on because I really want to get to the opening sentences. I just want to touch quickly upon backstory, which is to talk about what it is and how to use it a little bit. I have a whole lesson on backstory, so this will be really brief. But of course, backstory is all of the quote unquote what came before. So anything that precedes where your story opens. And this can be all the way back from childhood in your character's life. It can be last month, last year, yesterday, 10 minutes ago, it doesn't matter. What happens is we often reveal backstory in a dense expository way instead of letting backstory dribble out throughout the story in little pieces, a little dialogue here, a little piece of a clue here. Backstory is also sometimes manifest in our characters and how they behave, think, and exist in the world. You know, what's happened to them can come through in their very behavior. So remember that backstory can slow the pace and make the reader feel bored. It should really only occur when it is triggered by something in the front story. So like you shouldn't just randomly drop into backstory. When you do use it, you want to, something happens. Oh yes, in the moment, this reminds me of that time I had to, you know, jump the tracks when a train was coming, because something is happening now that is recurring, that is making it occur. So look for those chunks in your writing where you've done a lot of explaining about something. It can be explaining something about history, about a place, about a people, about your character's motivations, and try to condense it and then ask yourself, how can I let this come out in small doses throughout my story instead? That's not to say you can't use it at all, just be minimal about it, okay?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
When you first said it, I just wanted clarification. You were saying do dribble it through the story.
Do dribble it, don't dump it.
Okay, good. Because I was like, dump it, what? Okay.
Yeah, no dumping it.
Yeah, okay, got it. So dribble it through. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
Dribble it through. So it's in as small a doses as you can. Let your backstory come out in small ways. And dialogue is a great way to use, you know, a good technique for getting backstory across. There's all kinds of things like finding an old journal and reading a page, a letter, there's a lot of techniques. And if at any point in time, you guys want me to go into my backstory lesson, I'm happy to do so. All right, so then we're gonna finish up by just talking about opening sentences. And I think that the opening sentence is like a piece of art, and it often takes getting to the end of the book many times before you actually fine tune that opening sentence, the very first one that the reader reads. So I love that what Les Egerton in his book Hooked describes it as it is the door into the house of your manuscript. And do you want the door to be inviting, attractive, intriguing, or do you want a door that whimpers, the mundane resides here, enter at the risk of falling asleep? A good opening sentence also foreshadows something to come, possibly even the end. It promises the reader something compelling is coming. It should invite the reader into the next sentence. And now opening sentences begin in a number of ways, like may begin in action, philosophically, in a line of dialogue or a statement. And so what I'm going to do now is share a bunch of them that I loved. And first I went online to look some up, and they were like all really old cliche ones I've heard a million times. I was like, no, I'm going to go look off my bookshelf and pull sentences that grabbed me. So I'm just going to read them. The impossible happens once to each of us. I love that. And that's a great book. All of these books on here I loved. And you can see actually, I'll read them out loud for you too, Carrie. That's The Impossible Lives of Greta Wells by Andrew Sean Greer, who won the Pulitzer for his novel Les. This is from a memoir by Alice Anderson. We make chapels of our scars. I love that line. Some bright morning I'll fly away is the title. We started dying before the snow, and like the snow, we continued to fall. Tracks by Louise Erdrich. Before she became the girl from nowhere, the one who walked in, the first and last and only who lived 1,000 years, she was just a little girl in Iowa named Amy. And that's from The Passage by Justin Cronin. I was jolted awake by the sound of gunfire in one of the neighboring stacks. And that's really simple and straightforward, but hey, interesting right away. Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. My mother was raised on fairy tales, but I was raised on highways. The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. And then, I don't know, Lori Moore is one of my absolute favorite short story writers of all time. I love her stories. This one is great. In her last picture, the camera had lingered at the hip, the naked hip. And even though it wasn't her hip, she acquired a reputation for being willing. And that's from the short story Willing in Birds of America by Lori Moore. So I would love at some point in this class for us to write and share an opening sentence that we love, and we might not be there yet. So I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind for the rest of the class, and I might revisit this exercise. And so you have all this time you can practice. If you don't want to share one, you don't have to, but I think that it's really fun to think about, what is that first moment that we invite a reader in? What does it look like? Oh, good, Mark's back in time for his critique. Does it invite the reader in? Does it make you feel like, ooh, this is definitely going to be something I want to know more about? And as I was looking back through some of my books, I realized some of them took me 3, 4, 5, even 10 sentences to really get hooked. But the ones that hooked me from the first page or from the first sentence, the whole book was like that. Like, it's just something about once you get that right line, sometimes the rest can follow. So, all right. Does anyone have any questions or need to take, run to the restroom or get some water before we talk about Mark? Let's see here. Any questions? Mark's putting his hands over his ears. Don't be scared. This is a nice group. Okay, so let me just do what I'm going here real quick. Sorry, hang on. Yeah, Yannicka was saying she would like to have sharing of opening sentences. So we will definitely do that later on. And if by the final class I haven't remembered to